Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we're going to the Ksubas stop Mem Beis. We are going to begin on Mem Aleph Mem Beis by the Mishnah, by the new parak. Naira Shinispatata, which of course we've been discussing in the third parak as well. So if you have this woman that was seduced, so the din is that Boshto Pagama Ukanasa Shilavia. All of the monies in which the man who committed this crime needs to pay, it goes to the father. However, Vatsar Betfusa. However, when it comes to the pain in which this woman received, this is Betfusa in the event of Oinus. Because in a situation where she was Mafata, there's no tsar. Now the Mishnah discusses the following situation. The Bedin. Ad Shalom Meis Ha'av. So let's say the father was still alive, and the courts ruled that this money will need to be given over. Now, Hari Hein Shalav. So because she's a Naira, the din is that the father receives all of these monies as we just mentioned. Now, what happens if Meis Ha'av? Let's say the father died before the man actually gave the money. So now the father's not in the picture. Who does he give it to? So it goes to the heirs, to the Yarshim, which are the brothers. Now, lo his speak alamad bedin ad shemes av harhein shel atzma. However, let's say the court case didn't get concluded, and therefore, because of this, it wasn't definitive what the din is until after the father died. And then after the father died, they said, okay, this person has to start paying, so it goes to her. Because, of course, the father never was alive at the time of having this money, and therefore there's no monies to be transferred over to the Yarshim. Now, let's say Umda Bedin. So again, there was this court case, Ad Shul Bagra, before she was a Bulgaris, because it's a short window. She's only a Naira from 12 to 12 and a half. So now, let's say she's still a Naira, Hari Hein Shalav. Then, of course, it goes to the father, Meis Ha'av Hari Hein Shal Achin. It'll go to the brothers, to the Yorshim, as we said before. However, Lo Hispik Alamad Bedin Ad Shabagra Hari Hein Shal Atzma. Even though she was violated when she was a Naira, but let's say the court case didn't get concluded until after she's a Bulgaris, so the din is that she gets to keep the money herself. Shimon argues and says, Im lo hispika ligvois ad shemes av harahin shel atzma. He says no, that if let's say the money wasn't collected until the father died, and then the father died, she keeps it. So this is actually an argument. In the event where there was a mother bedin, but yet the monies were not given over, so the question is, at that moment, is it the father's? So Rashi says that Apapi Shamdu Bedin Loy Habi Maman Da'av Harish Lavanav Adamatil Yade. According to Rav Shimon, it actually has to be in his hands. He actually has to have a tvisa of this money. And until that time, it's not his. And therefore, if he died before, so the money will end up going to the daughter and not to the Yorshim. Rav Shimon Omer, Imo his speak likvois at shemes av hari hein shel atzma. As we continue to Mem Beis Amud Aleph. Masi Odeha. However, when it comes to her work, says Rashi, Shiasa b'chay aviha, that she did work while her father was alive. U'mitziasar. Let's say she found a lost object. Afal pi shlo gavsa mesa av hari hein shel achin. So he agrees, and we'll have to understand why, that the reward for her work, or if she found something, but it was not yet given over to her hands, the Metzias is a little bit difficult, but certainly Masiyadahu we can understand, she did the work, but she didn't get her paycheck yet. So the din still is that it belongs to the father, even though he would die before the money actually came in, because it was his already. Okay. Now, Rashi says, Mesa av hari hein shel achim. Here it says achim. So if let's say the father died, so he said it goes to the brothers. Zachal boy ha'av, v'lo damil knas. So when it comes to Masiyah, it's not the same thing as the Kanas, as we mentioned by Anis Mafata. According to Rav Shimon, it's until there's actual testimony in Amad Badin. When it comes to Kanas, as we've established before, Moed Kanas is Pater. So there is a distinction when it comes to this. Okay. So the Gemara says, my kamashmon. And Rashi actually over here points out our question. So the question is, how's it shacked that she found it and she must have picked it up? So that should have been the Zachi right there. So the Gemara asks the following: my kamashmon tanina. We already learned all of this. It's already been discussed. It says a mafate, when a woman is seduced, noisin shloisha devarim, they receive three things, which of course is the kanas, boishas begam. But einis arba, and the einis also you receive the tsar. Mafate noisin boishas begam kanas, and moisav alav einis shenesan es tsar. Okay, the Gemara says beferish. So we already know this. So what exactly is our Mishnah saying over here? That narish nespatata boishta begam kanasa. We already know this. So we know what is given, but we don't really know, we haven't known until this point to who it's given to. So the chiddush is that it's given over to the father. That's not mentioned. That's obvious. It's clearly going to the father, since she did the bia baratzon by the case of mafata. So how is it possible to think that she had bia baratzon and she's also going to be able to collect? So the bedin etzrichalei put Rav Shimon rabbanan. So the notion of amad bedin, as we said, where there was amad bedin, but yet then the father died, which is a machlokus, that is something in which was not clear until our Mishnah was mentioned. So therefore we brought this down in certain parts, the ratio of the Mishnah, even though it may not have been much of a chiddush, nonetheless, in order to be able to eventually get to the case of the Machlokes Rav Shimon Rabban. It's non-hasam. So we learned in Masechta Shavuos, in the case of the following. It says, Anasta upitisa as biti. A person accuses a man that you seduced or you raped my daughter, and therefore you're chayiv kanas. V'hu omer lo anasti v'lo petisi, and he says it's not true. I never did any of those things. So he didn't relent. He said mashbiachani, I want you to make a shvua that what you're saying is true. V'amar amen, and he said yes, I will make such a shvua. V'yacha choyde, and then afterwards he admits to the fact that he did these things. So chayiv. What is he chayiv? So Rashi says, Karen b'chayimish the osham im hoyde acharikin v'zeu osham gezelos. So since he took an oath on the money that he owed, so therefore it's a case of osham gezelos, in which the din is he has to pay back the Karen, the chayimish, an additional fifth, and he also has to bring a carbon. Even in this type of a case, Rav Shimon poiter. Rav Shimon says no. In this situation, there's no chiyuv of having to bring a carbon osham gezelos. She'en misham knas al pi atzmai. He says the reason is because you don't pay knas based on yourself. Now, you need edim to be able to testify that you actually committed a crime in which there's a penalty. However, as Rashi says, de'il oidile, come on, shetavo have a mifter. If when he was approached, he said, did you do this? And if he would have said, yes, I did commit this crime, so ki kafrenami enzu shuvas kviras mamoin. So it's interesting. The whole notion of having to bring a carbon has to be that first you say no, and you make an oath to that effect, and then you admit that it's not true. But in this situation, if you in fact would have admitted to the crime, then it's a case of moed b'knas pater. Then you wouldn't have had to pay the knas at all. So therefore, this is an unusual circumstance, and therefore it doesn't fall into the normal situation of Ashim Gzelos. So Amr Lo says, what do you mean? Alpha bin Mishalem Knas Al Piatzmo, even though it's true, you don't pay the Knas aspect, but Alpha Mishalem Baishas Begam Al Piatzmai, the Baishas Begam, that's a case of Mamoin. And therefore, even if you admit to it, you would still have to pay that. So that was the response. Says Rashi, again, because it's a case of Mamoin. Fine. So on this, Abai asked a question. A person says to his friend, which some friend, Anasta upatisas biti, that again you violated my daughter. Not only that, but you actually were brought to court, and the court decided that you in fact owe me money. No, I never violated your daughter. And obviously, therefore, I never went to the courts. And obviously, they never said that I was obligated to pay you anything. Now, V'nishban, he makes an oath, and then afterwards he admits. So, Rav Shimon, according to Rav Shimon, who said in the previous case that this person is pater, maybe this case is different. Why? Kivanda Amad Badin, since there was already a Amad Badin, so the fact is now it's considered to be now on a different level of mamoin. Says Rashi, V'yihavi maidele kaman havi mishalom shekvar chiyuv based in rishon al pi edim hashim maidek kafir v'chayev. He doesn't really have the ability to just flat out deny it or to admit to it and be moed b'knas pater, because it was already been determined that he's chayev, not through his own admission. So therefore, maybe it is more like a normal case of Ashim Gzelos. We have Mechayvel had carbon shvua. We still know it's still considered to be a knas, even though it's true that he can't really be moed b'knas in this situation. But nonetheless, we're still dealing with the typical situation of having to pay this money, which is knas, and therefore there's no din shvuas, no din of an Ashim Gzelos. So had carbon shvua. So interesting, Rav Shimon here clearly agrees that when it comes to the case of already a madabadin, at that situation he is chayiv to bring. So Rav Shimon is moed in this case. So Esav Rav Shimon, Oimer Yochel Oimer Chavero. You would think if a person would say to his friend, "Anasta patisi as biti, who Oimer lo nasta patisi." A person again denies this claim that he did this to his daughter, to this man's daughter. Or if a person would say, Hamish Shorchlas Abdi, that your ox killed my servant, who Amr Lo Hamis, no. O She'amr Lo Abdo Hipalta, it's interesting, it doesn't say O in the other case. O She'amr Lo Abdo Hipaltas Shini, your servant Sharmulu Avdoi Pepaltas Shini knocked out the tooth, V'Samisas Einai knocked out my eye, Lo'amerlohi Palti V'loi Simisi. This is what the Shomul Avd is saying, that my eye was knocked out, and therefore I should be able to go free. Rashi says, Hipaltas Shini Nami Kanasahu, Shahari Mamoinahu Ke'echad Min HaChamoyrim. Okay, so you would think that this person would be chayav to bring a carbon. So you have all these different cases, which is interesting. Why the pasuk has to mention all these different situations, but when it comes to all these different forms of denial, whether it's an object that you found, or it was something you stole, or safekeeping a deposit, or whatnot. So all of these things have one thing in common. We're going to say in a second. So the pasuk says that you denied, v'nishbal shakar, and you lied regarding to this effect. So then you have to bring a carbon in all those situations. But ma'elu muchadim, all these things are unique and have a similar characteristic. Shei mamoin. All these cases are moments. So according to Rav Shimon, he says that when it comes to a case of this pasuk of Ashim Gazelos is dark in a situation where it's a case of mamoin. However, if it's a case of knas, so then the pasuk, the fact that it mentions all these cases, come to exclude it. As we continue to mem beis and beis, my love, is it not b'shalmad b'din? That, and this is a question. Even in a situation where there's already a mad b'din, even there, Rav Shimon will say your pater. Hello, b'shalmad b'din. If there was no amad b'din, that's when Rav Shimon says your pater. However, Rav Shimon will admit that if there's already a amad b'din, in that situation you will be chayav to bring the carbon. That's not so simple, because v'hamid reisha b'shalmad b'din sevanam b'shalmad b'din. I'm going to show you. In order for the beginning and the later statements to be comparable, they both have to be a amad b'din. How do we see this? Tani reisha. Ainli el devarim shemishalman aleihen es karen. So I only mention things that we have to pay the principal. Karen is the object that you stole, which is, of course, mamoin. Tashlumi kefa tashlumi arba chamisha. So having to pay back the double for stealing, or 4 and 5 for Geneva Tvicha Machira, V'oines Mafata, Umaitzi Shemra, which Motzi Shemra is clearly also another case of Kanas. These are all cases of Kanas. Menayin, how do we know? Talmud Leimer, Umal Mal. So why does it say this pasuk? This is a reba. It's coming to include that even when we're dealing with Kanas, there's also a chiyuv of keren chaimish and an osh. Now, hey chidami, when do we say that you're chayiv? Idolo amad b'din. If there was no amad b'din at all, sekfela miika. So how could there be kefil? Says Rashi, mi yemar diganav ditavik fela. Who says that he stole that he would have to pay the kefil? The od dilma moedim ifter. We know when it comes to moedim b'knas, you can be potter. So how do we know that there be a chiv kefil at all? El pshita b'shalmad b'din. We have to establish that this case, where over here is b'shalmad b'din. Now, with a reisha b'shalmad b'din, sevanami b'shalmad b'din. So therefore, the case of Rav Shimon is talking about even in the case of shalmad b'din, Rav Shimon will say, no, when it comes to the case of kanas, you're going to be potter. You don't have to bring a carbon. So how could we say before that you're going to be chayiv to bring carbon? Or malay yichil l'shnui loch. I could of course always answer you reisha, and this is the Tanakama and the Havamina. The reisha is b'shalmad b'din, and the seifa, which is Rav Shimon, b'shalmad b'din, and the seifa is according to Rav Shimon, and it's shalmad b'din, and that's when it doesn't work. That's when you're not chayav to bring a carbon. V'kul Rav Shimon he. V'shnuya dechiki l'mishanin loch. However, a difficult answer we don't like to give. Dim kain amr li lisni reisha Rav Shimon omer, or lisni seifa divrei Rav Shimon. You should say that these are the words to make it more clear that this is exactly what's being said. Elakula b'shalmad b'din. I have to stick to what you're saying. And in fact, the whole thing must be case of Amad B'din. The question is, how do we understand Rav Shimon now? V'reish Rabbanan v'sefer Rav Shimon u'madina loch v'inin carbon shua derachmana patre mevachichesh. That he will actually admit that there will not be a chi of carbon even in the case of Amad B'din because of vachichesh. V'chi kamina mamain havi l'harishal levanav. And when we say it's a din mamoin, that is in order for the children to be able to inherit. Says Rashi, Misha Amad B'din umeis. If there was Amad B'din and he died, Ad shlu hispik ligvais, until the monies were collected, Harihu shalacheha velo shalah. As we established, in that situation, we had the the question exactly who will inherit it if the father died between the time of the collection and the Amad B'din. 8. Okay, let's hold off for 1 second. Let's see a couple questions. Question 3. Anusa sh'amda b'din. Actually, we did that already. We did not. Anusa sh'amda b'din. V'lo espika ligvais kanasa Ad Shemei Savia O Shabagra Shalmi Hakanas. So, if let's say the father died, and we're dealing with a situation where the father died after Hamad Badin. So according to the Rabbanan, it goes to the brothers, to the Yarshim. Rav Shimon says that she keeps it because the money were not actually given yet. However, when it comes to Bagra, we also see the same thing. The Rabbanan say it goes to the father, and according to Rav Shimon, it's going to also be La'atzma. Okay. Let's see if there's another question here. TA26. Inyan Beis Devarim regarding two matters. Sfirli Rav Shimon de Acher Hamad Badin. After Hamad Badin, Ein Zek Mamoin. It's not considered like Mamoin. Inyan Beis Devarim Sfirli de Havi Kamamoin Elohein. It's a hard question. So he says, Inyan Carbon Shvua, when it comes to Shvua, or Inyan Lo Hispika Ligvois Ad Shemei Sa'av, O Shabagra Enu Kamamoin. So in these situations, he holds, if let's say again the father died before it was collected, or she became a Bogeres, so the din is, it's not considered like Mamoin in the fact that she's able to collect it. However, Indian might be Kanas, Harishul Avanav, Havi Kamamoin, which is what we just said over here. It does have a certain status of Mamoin as well. Okay. It's a little bit of a challenging question, but that is TA26. Okay, let me just mark down a little bit of this. TA26. And it continues all the way to over here. V'chikamina mamoin havi l'harish l'vanav. TA26. And let's just see that Rashi one last time. Mishama badin umeis ad shlu hispik ligvois harihu shel acheha v'loi shilva. Okay, let's see TB28. Mimasei nasi chagnash shel ha'inus mafata maman etzel av l'inin l'harish l'vanav. So he says Tanakama Mishama badin Rav Shimon ad shegil yadai, which is a Beferish Mishnah, which is a pretty clean, simple question. That would be Mem Aleph Amud Beis also. TB28. TB28, so it goes here, and also that Rashi, which we saw. Okay, let's continue. Esvei. So the Gemara now asks the following question. Shimon Omer, Imu hispika ligvois ad shemei sa'av. Let's say again the father dies, and the monies were not yet collected. So according to Rav Shimon, who gets this money? Harihin shalatzma. So the girl gets it. Now, v'yamrit mamoin havi l'harish l'vanav. This is the question that was a little bit difficult, because if the statement above, which we just said, is according to Shita Rav Shimon, that's considered to be mamoin, that the children inherit it l'atzmo mai ta'achin boy mahava. The statement is very difficult because the father, if in fact when he dies, it says that it's considered to be mamoin, and the children get it. We said that the children don't get it. The girl gets it. Somewhere of a high milsa kashiba rabba Rav Yosef Esther v'tartin shnin. It was a great question. It was such a difficult question that they didn't know the answer for 22 years. And Rashi says, Rabba Choref v'kach karua oiker harim Rav Yosef havi bal shmuais u'mishna brayso v'kach karuhu Sinai. So Rabbi and Rav Yosef, as we see in the very end of Masechtas Brachos, were brilliant people, and nonetheless they were still grappling over this discussion, this question. For Ifrik wasn't answered ad Yosef Rav Yosef Bereisha, until Rav Yosef eventually was put on the top, because what ended up happening was, and this was based on interpretations and dreams, that he saw that he was going to die after being in service for 2 years, so he let Rabbi go first. So it says, Rashi says, Yemei Shirasai Shel Rabba. The 22 years is the amount of years that Rabba was the leader. And then he died. Yoshev Rav Yosef Barosh. And then he sat V'seatuhum in a Shemayim. And then all of a sudden he had siyata d'shmaya to answer the question. Uperka. Shani Hasim, the Omer Kra, the Pasuk says, V'nasan isha sheikh of ima l'abi hanayra chamishim kasef. So it says, when it's given over this money of 50 kasef. Lo zichsa tayro av el mishas nasina. So, even though it's true, the question is, what do you mean? How do we say that why would she get it? And the answer is because the pasuk says beferish b'nasan. It's only when the monies are given over in this situation. Even though he may have some technical zechiyah because it was already a man b'din, Rabbi Shimon says no. The pasuk says b'nasan. It was actually given over, which is interesting. Just like the position was given over, even though there was already a mother b'din that eventually Rabbi Yosef is going to take over the position. However, it wasn't until he was actually given over the position. At that moment was he able to come up with the answer. So what does that mean? It just means b'shar kanasais. It's just referring to other penalties. Says Rashi, Mish'amad badin b'shar kanasais mifter su b'hoida. It just means that at that point they can no longer admit to it and be potter. We no longer say moed b'kanas potter, because once there's a moed b'din, the court's already decided that this person has to pay. But in reality, it's just like our Mishnah said. Rav Shimon holds that it goes to her. It just means that when we say Mamaynahavil Harish Lavanav, it just means Bishar Kanasais. Okay. Al Miata Gabi Eved. But how come when it comes to an Eved, we find something similar? Kesev Shloishim Shkolim Yitain Ladanav. He shall give it to his master. So Hachinami Lozich Satar Adan El Meshas Nasina. Is it true that we say the same din? That only once the money is given over, the Adain is Zeichet? So Yitain L'chud v'Nasan L'chud. He says the difference between Yitain, he shall give, and v'Nasan, when it's given. So Yihachi Talmud Yihachi Talmud V'chiche Shalmud v'Nasan Miboile. Since it wasn't given over yet, it's still considered to be a kanas. So Marava Kiyitzrach V'chichesh Kagain Sh'amda B'din Ubagra Umesa. What happens if there was a mother b'din, she became a boigeres, and then she died? The hasim ki kayaris aviha. When does the father inherit? Mina dida kayaris. It's mamoin, since he was yarish from his daughter who died. Still, he's potter because of the chichesh. Yachi yotzu elushin kanas mamoinu. Why are we saying it's kanas? It's mamoin. So Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yitzchak, yotzu elu she'ikrin kanas. It just means the ikr, the main. Normally it's kanas. You're right. In this situation, is considered to be mamoin, since he was already yarship from his daughter. But nonetheless, the din still is. It's comparable to a normal situation of kanas. Eis Rav Shimon poiter, Rav Shimon poiter, shenim misham kanas al piatzmai. Time the oma bedin. Since now it's mamoin, you should have to pay. So carbon shua nami chayiv. So why doesn't he say you're also chayiv a carbon? So Rav Shimon levrayim de rabbanan karmahu. With the according to me, Rav Shimon afagav del mabadin rachmana patre mevachichesh. The pasuk already says that you're going to be pater. It doesn't matter even if there's no mabadin. Oh, dinchu oidolimias agreed to me heichad lo mabadin. At least when there was not yet a mother b'din, the katava kanasa katava, that he's claiming something which is kanas. So therefore, you should be potter if it's sholma b'din. So as we continue, Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, omayde b'kanas potter, rabbanan savri no ki katava boishes v'gam katava. The truth is that, as we said, he's claiming not just the kanas; his focus is on the boishes v'gam. So b'may kamifki, so Rav Papa, Rav Shimon Savar lo shavik inish midi the kits. A person's not going to distance himself from a set amount, the kanas, which he considers that is the ikr claim, because that money is guaranteed. The guaranteed money is what he's talking about, and he's not focused on the bosh begam. Obviously, he's going to want the money for that too, but that's not the ikr. But Well, mifter v'tavamidi dechi moide be mifter. He knows that there's a concept of moed b'knas pater. So therefore, when it comes to kanas, this guy can admit to it and be free. So therefore, that's not going to be the ikr, because there's a good chance that this person is not going to end up paying me the kanas. So therefore, my primary focus is on the monies that I'm definitely going to get, which is the boishas begam. And therefore, the boishas begam is considered to be mamoin, and therefore, for that reason, according to the Rabbanan, you are going to be chayiv in that situation to have to bring a carbon ashim. So let's look at question 4. We're going to stop there. Anas the padisa asbiti v'lomer lo. So ma'atam the chachamim the mechayiv carbon shvua. Why did the chachamim say you're chayiv? Af shetavo kaidim sham b'bedin, even before mother bedin. And we said because even though you want to say the answer is because it's a case of mamoin. Rashi he says like this, number 4. Time of the rabbanan the stam tayin anas the lotava el boishas begam. Rav Shimon says he learns out from v'chichesh v'misai, but bikadin the inchayiv carbon shmua el be'elud ikrid mamoin. You only chayav a carbon on something which is mamoin, like the examples mentioned in the pasuk, excluding this, which is a case of kanas. Adkan.